Thank you very much, and Ernst, thank you very much for the introduction. And I was listening to part of what you said about tax evasion and tax avoidance, and I absolutely agree with it. I'm looking forward to working with you at our meeting of European Socialists at the end of February to further discuss these matters. Could I say thank you very much to the Fabian Society for inviting me again to speak to your annual meeting. And I was reflecting of the power of the Fabian Society and its foundation in 1906. Quite correctly put forward a policy that there should be a national minimum wage in the country, and in 1998, only 92 years later, the Labour Party caught up with that and introduced it. So who said there isn't an inevitability of gradualness in what you do? First of all, I should also, of course, wish you all a very happy new year. I'm sure it's going to be as exciting a year as 2016 will be. It's a year in which the shadow of the last is going to loom very large over all of us. In a week's time, President-elect Donald Trump will in fact become the 45th President of the United States. And this government is without a plan, will move to invoke Article 50 to start what risks being a shambolic Brexit that protects the interests of bankers but does nothing, absolutely nothing for our people and our communities. Last year's political earthquake didn't just come out of the blue. There are many of us in this room who had felt the tremors growing for many years. The people who run Britain have been taking this country for a ride. They've stitched up our political system to protect the powerful. They've put the country at risk by taking us into, frankly, disastrous foreign wars. They've rigged the economy and business rules to line the pockets of their friends. They've slashed taxes for the richest. Another £70 billion is going to be slashed by 2022, and cut pay and vital services for the rest. They've sold off our country's assets and handed over public services to be milked by tax dodgers. They've piled up debt while failing to invest in jobs and industries of the future. The truth is, the system simply doesn't work for most people. For a generation of young people, job security is a pipe dream and means nothing. It's a relic to them of a distant age. They work through a temp agency or on 0-hours contracts, not knowing whether they're working from one day to the next or what they're earning from 1 week to the next, a complete inability to plan their lives. The stress, the insecurity and misery this brings with it. Well, who actually benefits from this? Only those employers who can squeeze a bit more profit out of the workers with fewer hours, lower pay and less rights at work. And pay has been driven down. 6 million people in Britain don't earn a living wage. And the number of people in work and in poverty, is at a record high. But we're not a poor country. Together, we create immense wealth. But the rules of today's race to the bottom jobs market rig the system for the few, while millions of the rest of us carry the can. None of that delivers a good deal for consumers either, because those same workers get fleeced as consumers simply for wanting a home or trying to get to work. Hundreds of thousands of people live in a house which was built by a local authority, but which is now owned by a private landlord, who makes a fortune from housing benefit, charging rents higher than any council would ever charge. People are fed up with getting ever higher energy bills from energy companies that raked in record profits again and handed out inflation-busting pay deals to their pocket-stuffing executives, but nothing of the kind for their regular staff. People are fed up with waiting on understaffed platforms for trains that are suddenly cancelled, trains run by private companies that are now receiving far more public subsidy than British Rail ever did throughout the whole time of its public ownership. And yes, I'm sorry, I know this might upset the Daily Telegraph, and I apologise to the Daily Telegraph if they're present with us today. And it might even upset the Tory Transport Secretary, Chris Grayling. But I tell you this, I would rather be standing with the railway workers who are trying to run a safe railway system than standing with fat cat rail bosses that are being subsidised to make a profit out of the system. Charging rail passengers an arm and a leg for the most expensive fares in Europe for what is, in many cases, a second-rate service. Labour, under my leadership, stands for a complete break with this rigged system. We will hand back wealth and control to people and communities. We'll put the public back into our economy and break the grip of vested interests. We will shrink the gap between income and wealth and build a more equal society. We'll make sure the corporations and the richest pay their fair share of taxes. We will end the race to the bottom in the jobs market and guarantee education and employment rights for all. It's what we, the Labour Party, were founded to achieve. We will build the homes people need and invest in a 21st century economy that leaves nobody and no community behind. Right now, they've rigged the rules to suit themselves. The super-rich few have benefited from tax break after tax break under this government. Just think about it. Cuts to capital gains tax, inheritance tax, ditching the 50p rate on income tax, slashing the corporation tax, reducing the levy on the banks. But remember this, they couldn't find one penny for the National Health Service or social care in a very lengthy autumn statement. Week after week at Prime Minister's Question Time, we've been challenging Theresa May over the crisis in the NHS and social care. The thousands waiting more than 4 hours at A&E departments. The million elderly people not getting the social care they need and deserve. And as a result, their families suffering and many women having to give up work to help older relatives who need support they can't get. And young people with mental health problems who don't get the support and the care that they need. People across this country feel the system is rigged against them, that it's simply just not right. Whether it's a struggling young professional saddled with thousands in debt from university, would have to save up to 30 years to get a deposit for a mortgage on a flat. Or the battling small business with a full order book but an empty bank account because their big business customers won't pay on time. And the bank won't give them a bridging loan, never mind a capital loan to expand their operation. Or the scared 75-year-old stuck in a hospital bed, desperately wanting to be looked after at home, but with no care to support or help them. They all know the rules of the game are rigged against them. The Conservatives promised to fix the roof while the sun was shining. How many times did we hear that from David Cameron? Instead, they carried on fixing the system for an elite few at the top and ignoring the needs of the roof. Power, wealth and opportunity lies in the hands of the privileged few, not the many. The Prime Minister may say she wants a shared society. We've heard a lot about that this week. But the Tories have spectacularly failed even to begin to share the wealth fairly across society or the nations or region. So is it really a surprise that when people were offered the chance to make their country great again or to take back control, that many voted for it? For some, it was their first chance to exercise a bit of real power and say what they thought about a system that was stacked against them. In the US, the Democratic favourite lost the presidency to a reality TV star. In Britain, a Prime Minister and his Chancellor were seen off by a slogan on a bus. But the Leave and Trump campaign succeeded because they both recognised the system was broken and the people weren't being listened to. Recognising that your car won't start, however, is one thing. Knowing how to repair the car is another. So we're going to call time on this rigged system because power is in the wrong hands. It's not enough to bring back powers from faceless bureaucrats, as they're alleged to be, when the rules are rigged for the moneyed class defended to the hilt by a government based in Downing Street. As well as taking on those who profit from this rigged system, we also need to take power away from the centre and hand it to every street, town, avenue, country lane across the country. The Tories used to talk about a northern powerhouse. But how can you have a powerhouse when you've been cutting council budgets all over the country by at least 40%? That's because the Conservatives, under Cameron, Osborne and now May, have devolved power. They haven't really. What they've done is devolved austerity to regions all over the country and left local authorities to carry that can. Nothing makes this cowardice clearer than the social care crisis. Cutting £4.6 billion in social care funding over the last Parliament. They've now told councils to fill the gap by raising council tax, knowing full well that won't even meet 3% of what councils are already spending on social care, mainly for the elderly. They're passing the buck to councils, shifting the blame and handing you the bill. Tory misrule has not only created a postcode lottery in health, but in jobs and economic prosperity as well. Since 2010, only 2% of the new jobs have been created in the North East. By 2021, the amount spent every year per person on transport infrastructure will reach £1,900 in London. In the North East, it will be less than £300. And you've only to look at our second chamber, the esteemed House of Lords, to see how skewed it is to the south. Nearly half of all peers making decisions for our nations and regions are based in London and the south east. Just 5% are from the northwest, and I know them all. The way this country is run is lopsided, unbalanced and unfair. Power, wealth and opportunity isn't shared across the country or anything like it. It's concentrated in and around our capital. And that's a big part of why many people feel politics is broken. For too long, governments have only thought about the short term. Brexit means we must plan for the long term. There's a compelling need to use our exit from the EU to rebalance Britain and provide a vision of what the country could be. The Fabians were famous for their belief that there should be a slow, gradual transition and expansion of socialism. I would suggest today's demands and challenges require us to go a little bit faster. Britain could be better off after leaving the EU, but that is not inevitable. And it won't happen with a government that stands by while wages are driven down, while industry declines, while public services are sent into meltdown. We will push to maintain full access to the European single market, to protect living standards and jobs. We will also press to repatriate powers from Brussels for the British government to develop a genuine industrial and regional strategy, essential to invest in our economy so that no community is left behind. And just as no community should be left behind, no community should be scapegoated either. The shocking and appalling rise in racist attacks post the EU referendum shames us all, and we've got to unite together to oppose racism in any form whatsoever within our society. Politicians have a responsibility to cool our language. Words have consequences, and the language used by some in the referendum campaign simply gave a green light to xenophobia and race hatred. Migrants come here to work. Tens of thousands of migrants keep our National Health Service going and ensure the good health that we all enjoy. So when it comes to immigration, we'll do what's best for the economy, and that includes stamping out, absolutely stamping out, the exploitation of migrant workers, exploited by some employers to drive down terms and conditions for everyone else. We want to deliver a Brexit that works for everyone. We need to push power and resources to our councils and regions. Local authorities were once at the vanguard of innovation. They had to be. Those in the 19th and early 20th century inherited the most terrible social problems. But they had the powers and the opportunity to try and do something about it. This country has slowly been more democratised, and it was local government that helped to achieve a lot of that. From the 19th century onwards, many local authorities pioneered welfare provision to reduce poverty. They rid their towns of slum housing, built new homes, parks, hospitals, museums, libraries, swimming pools, playing fields. All of that helped to reduce inequality and improved the lives of the many, as many people put enormous work into improving their community through local government. In the face of a government that cuts and neglects today, Labour councils are finding that pioneering spirit as best they can in the most difficult circumstances. Let me give you a few examples. Brent Council became the first in the country to offer business rate discounts as an incentive to local firms to pay the living wage, thus boosting living standards for low-paid workers and improving the local economy at the same time. Hull City Council, a great record of municipal enterprise over many decades, not only successfully campaigned to get Siemens to build a green port, to develop a new generation of wind turbines and create 1,000 jobs locally into the bargain, they also won the chance to become the new UK City of Culture, delivering £30 million of increased investment. Nottingham City Council became the first authority to set up its own energy supply company, challenging the Big Six by offering low-cost energy, literally giving power to the people. We can learn a lot from them, and we've learnt a lot from them already on policies we want a Labour government to follow. In a post-Brexit Britain, it's vital that the government gives local authorities more powers and resources to innovate and generate prosperity, and crucially, to reduce inequality at the same time. Local government elections this May give us a chance to put that case very strongly. And we also want to see further devolution powers. My colleague John Trickett, a proud, very proud Yorkshireman, if ever there was one, talked yesterday about the need for more powers for the north of England. We both believe that a People's Convention on how a federal Britain could work is something that is long overdue. And I'm looking forward to working with the Fabians, trailblazers on this devolution revolution. Maybe, Andrew, next year's conference could be held somewhere outside London, as an example. And if you wish it, Andrew, I'd be happy to contribute to a pamphlet on this very subject, if you would like it. That's an offer, OK? Brexit demands we face these issues afresh and develop the long-term vision to build a fairer, more just society in Britain. As I was saying to Ernst at the beginning, in a few weeks' time, we'll be holding a summit of European socialist leaders. And it may surprise you, maybe not, that I've personally invited the President and Director General of the CBI to attend as well. I gave them the letters and they're coming. They agreed and they're going to be attending. And I'm very pleased they are. But many business people and entrepreneurs are increasingly realising that Labour has something to say to them as well. That a rigged system and a government that stands by is letting them down too. They've continually warned against the cliff edge of a chaotic exit from the European Union. Sadly, the government's Brexiteers seem to be following the advice of another thoughtful group, namely known as Lemmings, and making no preparations whatsoever. So it's Labour that's fighting for tariff-free access to single market, for firms to trade with our biggest trading partners in the interests of business, workers and our economy. But we also have common ground on other issues related to rebalancing growth and investment across the UK, to fast-tracking infrastructure spending, to build the crucial transport and digital links to maximise the whole country's potential. So we intend to stand shoulder to shoulder with small businesses around the country as they're forced to pay up to 50% increase in their business rates. When I spoke at the CBI annual conference, I told them that we believed in government intervention for the common good. That's why we will introduce a national investment bank with regional banks to support investment-led growth and provide the patient, long-term finance that is needed to develop businesses and enterprise. We will use public intervention to unleash the creativity and potential of entrepreneurial Britain by training the high-skilled people that they need. I was also very honest with the CBI. I explained that it will mean increasing corporation tax to pay for university grants and a new educational maintenance allowance so that no talent is left behind due to the inability to pay or fear of debt. Give everyone a chance. Many workers in Britain have not had a pay rise for years. I highlighted this earlier this week. The average pay of a FTSE 100 chief executive has rocketed to £5 million, more than 130 times more than the average UK worker. Get that figure, 130 times. That's not only grossly unfair, but it underlines a very serious economic problem. Britain needs the many to have better pay, not least because that means they have more money to spend, which grows the economy. Growth means more tax receipts, and the Exchequer will benefit from that, which means they'd have more money to pay for services like our National Health Service. People know that wealth isn't trickling down, it's flooding up. Curbing excessive pay would be a benefit for everyone. Businesses also need greater stability, a long-term plan, and a transport system that works. So does the whole British public. That's why Labour is committed to bringing the shambolic private train system, which puts profit before people, back into public ownership. That's not actually particularly ideological. It's actually straightforwardly logical. When Labour took the East Coast Line into public ownership, over 6 years, it developed a better service, improved satisfaction of passengers, and paid £1 billion in profit back to the taxpayer. That's an example of public enterprise working for the good of everybody. And we need to make housing about homes for the many, a simple concept, not investment opportunities for a few. Under this government, homelessness has doubled. You see it on the high streets and stations all over the country. People desperate for somewhere to lay their head at night. At the same time, house building has fallen to the lowest level since the 1920s. And when we proposed a very simple idea that homes for rent should be fit for human habitation as an amendment to their housing bill, the Tories voted it down. The next Labour government will give people a fair chance by putting decent, truly affordable homes at the heart of our programme for this country. We'll build thousands more genuinely affordable homes to rent and buy, give renters a new charter of rights, end rough sleeping, and help young people on ordinary incomes buy a home of their own. And we will end the ludicrous restrictions on local authorities' ability to build the council homes that local people need for their own population. And we will remove the restrictions on councils' ability to licence private landlords, which can, of course, help to drive up the standards and conditions. And finally, we will provide a long-term funding solution to our most precious national treasure, our National Health Service. Jeremy Hunt says there are problems at 1 or 2 hospitals. The Prime Minister says there's been a small number of incidents. Contrary to that, with what the professionals say, the BMA, conditions in hospitals across the country are reaching a dangerous level. The Royal College of Nursing, NHS conditions are the worst ever. Royal College of Physicians, the NHS is underfunded, underdoctored and overstretched. The Prime Minister tells us this morning that the real reason we have a crisis in the NHS is not because the government has slashed billions from social care budgets and underfunded our National Health Service. No. She's told her number 10 advisers to tell the media the real people to blame, the real culprits in all this, are the hard-pressed and under-pressure GPs. The Prime Minister has been accused by the BMA of scapegoating overstretched GP services and deflecting blame because funding is not keeping up with demand. This is another example of the Prime Minister in denial. A Prime Minister who would much rather listen to spin doctors than real doctors. I suggest she goes to visit a surgery and asks doctors what it's like. I know who I believe. It worries me, it worries all of you, and frankly, it should worry us all. I don't keep talking about the National Health Service because it's in Labour's comfort zone. I talk about the NHS because it's in a danger zone at the present time. Much of this is about the systematic neglect of our elderly people, over 1 million of whom are not getting the social care they need. We will not let the elderly down, people who've worked and contributed all their lives in taxes and made a huge contribution to our society. A total of 380 care home businesses have been declared insolvent since 2010. That's because the amount councils pay towards fees for residents is falling while costs are increasing. So we warn the government, if you don't put money into social care now, the system is at serious risk of breakdown. The 5th annual report of the Care Quality Commission found that 1 in 5 nursing homes did not have enough staff on duty to ensure people received good, safe care. Frankly, that is outrageous, 1 in 5. So a Labour government would give social care the funding it needs and give a firm commitment to take failed private care homes into public ownership to maintain the social care protection that our people need. It's the very least we can do to guarantee dignity for people who've given so much to our country. So let this be a year of new beginnings and opportunities. What's our mission? To restore hope, to show we can challenge and overturn a rigged system, hand back wealth and power to people and communities, and create a fairer, more equal society. Not let up in our demands that this government gives the National Health Service and social care the support it needs. Our party and movement of over 500,000 members and millions of affiliated trade unionists coming together to campaign for what we believe in. A country in which power and wealth is in the hands of the many, not the few. Thank you very much.